Hello, everyone. My name's Orion Lenz, and you're tuning into the Outabox podcast. Everybody, welcome to the show again, our third episode, and a long one at that, so I'm going to keep everything before the main segment very brief. We're going to skip our art news segment for today just for that reason, so I will let you in very briefly on what's going to happen. I had a great conversation with both Kevin Perjurer and Tony Goldmark, both very famous on the internet for their videos on theme park attractions and rides. And I'd say out of the 2-hour conversation that we had, I was able to use about 2/3 of the material. The other third was either unusable or just not needed, so I decided to cut that out for brevity's sake. Just a fair warning going into this episode. The sound on all parties was very, very loud. So I think what you might be able to hear in some of the segments of this podcast is the faint leakage that is coming through my own headphones. So I try to edit it down as much as possible, but it's still faintly there if you listen closely. But it wasn't as big as a deal as I thought it was going to be after reviewing it again and again and again. So that's a minor thing. Another thing, maybe if there's anything, just since it was loud, there's a lot of clicking going on in this one. So I don't know. With that out of the way, I'd like to introduce the main segment of the program. We create, therefore we are. Okay, so this is the first episode I've had with 2 guests on instead of 1, both of which I would consider very well versed in the topic that we're going to discuss today, which, give or take a few digressions, is generally about the future of California Adventure. Is it Californian anymore, or does it even matter if it's not? So, I'd like to introduce my guests, Kevin Perjurer and Tony Goldmark. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me as well.
All right, so let's get into the main debate of this podcast. So, as we know, California Adventure, ever since 2012, has had its major renovation, and it's been changing a whole lot since then, especially with the new news coming from D23 Expo 2017. So, really, the main question is whether or not California Adventure is really about California at all. And even if it isn't, does this even really matter? So, I'm just going to start off by saying, do either of you two have very strong opinions about this to begin with?
Kind of. I mean, as strong as I guess you can have towards a theme park, but I feel a certain way, and I'm sure Kevin does as well.
Yes, I have certain opinions on California Adventure. They're not as strong as on the other Disney parks or on other theme parks in general. California Adventure has always been a weird park since its opening. And so it's just, I don't know exactly how I feel about it. I'm sure this conversation will solidify my opinion one way or the other, I'm sure. But we'll see.
Yeah, so anyway, let me just primer you with a little bit of my position. And I'll let you know that a little bit of it is devil's advocate. But let me just hone you in on this. So I don't really care if they're going to change the theme either way, but I'm more concerned about it being coherent. If we just have the rides like the Cars Land and the Bugs Land and stuff like that, and then we add in Marvel's Land, it's just going to be kind of random IP land, in my opinion. It's not so much that the IPs in general are the problem, it's just that, like I said before, it's kind of the lack of consistency with it, because we've gotten Cars Land in there, and then what do we do? So Pixar is kind of its own land now, but Cars Land still exists, and then you have Marvel in there. But for the sake of this argument, I will go full devil's advocate on this, and say that to kind of really explain what they could have done with the California theme, because honestly, in my opinion, I know a lot of people make fun of that idea, but to be fair, the California theme is
I do.
inherently a bad concept.
Me too.
I don't think it's an inherently bad concept, honestly, and I'll explain to you why. When Walt first actually, and I'm not trying to be like the purist to say, oh, what would Walt do? But you got to realize when he first dedicated Disneyland, it was like, oh, these are based on the ideals of America. So you got to think of Disneyland itself as the theme park being like a genre-based theme park based on American values. So it's like, why not have a California theme park in there? But I think what Disneyland makes it stand out from just, oh, a celebration of America is the fact that it kind of hones in on the lore and the myth and the legend and the history of of America itself. So if you wanted to kind of hone in that idea with California Adventure itself, that would have been a great idea for the park. But they didn't. It was just contemporary California as it is. It was just mini-me's of a lot of the Californian landmarks. So what I think that they could have done, and this is me just being an idealist here, of what they could have done with at least 1.0, why not celebrate the myth, the lore, and the history of California? I don't know how technically PC it'd be, but what about like like some sort of conquistador, Pirates of the Caribbean flume ride or something like that? That would have been at least a more entertaining part of it, because I think what that park does is that, yes, it celebrates less the contemporary elements of America, and it's more of a imaginative retelling of it. Why didn't they do the same for California Adventure?
Well, I mean, and my answer to that is because Eisner had a deathly allergy to spending money. I mean, for a while, how familiar are you guys with Western River Expedition?
Oh, absolutely. I've read up on that, but that was...
For any listeners who don't know, the Western River Expedition was a ride that Mark Davis designed for Walt Disney World's Frontierland. The idea was, well, we don't want to build Pirates of the Caribbean at Disney World because Florida's too close to the actual Caribbean, and of course 30 years later they built a California theme park in California. But they thought, instead of building pirates, Mark Davis has designed this great ride called the Western River Expedition, which is basically like a pirates-esque ride through the history of the California Gold Rush and the Old West and all that. And they thought, now there's a ride we can build in Florida, because that would feel, too homey in California. But what happened, of course, was that when Disney World opened in '71, the first year visitors just bombarded them with complaints that there wasn't a Pirates of the Caribbean. They were like, well, you've got a Jungle Cruise, you've got a Haunted Mansion, you've got a castle, all those are in California. Where's your Pirates ride? So many that, Ron Miller essentially said, build a Pirates ride. I don't care how small it is. We're building it and opening it by Christmas of 1973. And in order to build it that quickly, they had to take all the money that had been reserved for the Western River Expedition budget. And they kept saying, well, we'll build that eventually. And they never did, because just it was never the right time. And Disney started to become afraid to spend money. And in the 90s, when this Disney's California Adventure idea first started being announced, a lot of the fans in Disney fandom were like, oh my God, they're finally going to build Western River Expedition, because that works perfectly. And that would have been, the perfect, big signature dark ride, pirates type thing for California Adventure. But I guess either it wasn't PC enough for the late 90s, or it was just they didn't want to dig out old ideas, or it was just too expensive, or a combination of all three is most likely, I think. But yeah, my feelings on but I'm sorry, I don't want to get distracted on another topic. If Kevin, if you wanted to rebut to that.
Let's see, where were we? On what was the original? What were we talking about? Original concept for the park? How it's a good idea. That's what the original point was. Okay.
How could it have been a good idea?
Adventure, I think it's a horrible idea for a park. Because it's the most limited idea. Just apart from the fact that it's in California, it has to be the most limited out of any theme park that, other than the ones that are also set in a specific state that don't really have theming. But even those are themed to either like the world or a different part of the world. It's so specific for what they can do, and they can't do much in those constraints. They put giant constraints on themselves to say, well, you have to be in California, instead of being able to do whatever they wanted. You have, Epcot, Magic Kingdom, all these things, even Hollywood Studios, any movie. Like, your limits are something to do with movies. Epcot, your limits are something to do with either the world or technology. The Animal Kingdom, your limit is nature. It's just, you put a limit and you said, here is your limit, it's California. And it's
not even nature that actually exists in the case of Pandora.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. They broke that limit. And so they broke in the limit with California, but you can't stretch California. It's either California or not California. You can stretch nature to fantasy, but California is a place, it's a state. It doesn't make sense why you theme the entire park about California, let alone why you would put that park in California. I mean, I know California is this idealized place and it's fantasized for a lot of the country, but seeming that Disneyland is not the biggest tourist destination, and that most of the people that go to Disneyland on a regular basis aren't the tourists that go to Disney World on a regular basis. They're the people that live near Disneyland. I don't see the draw of a theme park about California would be for the people that live in California. Sorry, I'm going to rant about this forever, but I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's a horrible and limiting idea. So that's what my thoughts on California.
Well, that kind of
This is going to be a really boring debate because I pretty much agreed with all of that. I don't have anything to rebut. It's like I hate to be the guy who says, that'll never work. I make fun of that on the show. In fact, I've got a character who's all he says is, "You fool, that'll never work." But I feel like it could work if you weren't afraid to get really original with it and build new stuff and really devote yourself to building a whole new universe surrounding just the concept of an idealized or even fantasized California. Like if they had built something along the lines of Western River Expedition, or or something or just something big and exciting and new, like if they'd actually built the original version of Superstar Limo before they watered it down and turned it into the horrible train wreck we got.
I haven't even heard of that. There was a good version of that?
Oh man, originally.
Did you not watch my video on this? Shameless plug. Defunctland episode something is Superstar Limo.
Yeah, originally Superstar Limo was going to be like this Mr. Toad's Wild Ride type thing of this frantic chase through Hollywood, and then Princess Diana got killed by Papa.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it's just I thought it was going to be like one of the Dick Tracy ride that they were planning, like where they just went through different movies and to stop crime.
You know what? If you rethemed the Dick Tracy ride just slightly so that it took place in, the gangster Los Angeles, that would have been perfect for California Adventure. Hell, I mean, if they'd held off on building Toontown, for a while, that would have been perfect in California Adventure. There's places you could go with it if you weren't afraid to really go crazy with it. But the problem is, Disney in the 2000s, everything had to be tied to an IP. Everything had to, everything had to just be a clone or something. They were afraid to spend too much money because Eisner was still smarting from the Euro Disneyland debacle. So, Disney California could work if you really went crazy with it, but they were afraid to. So that's sorry, not to interrupt, but yes, you could make it good. You could make it bizarre and weird and just have it be this, this idealized place of California, like you were saying earlier. The only way that I could see it being something that would work both commercially for large audiences is have it be similar to the Disney Cruise Line. I don't know if any of you have been on Disney Cruise Line. I talk about this way too often because I love them. Disney Cruise Line is every IP, and the theme is they're going on a cruise. So if you
and it's wonderful because you have Frozone's Treats from The Incredibles right next to Tow Mater's Grill, and it's just they're on the cruise with you. So if you had a park about California, but you incorporated the IPs in a balanced way, then I think you could just have like, oh, they're going to the California landmarks, and then you could have the Mickey gang with the Pixar characters, with the live action characters, but you have to do that all at once. You can't just have, well, Guardians of the Galaxy, there's Marvel, and then, this and this and this. And yes, so you could make California Adventure work, but you really have to stretch it. And that's when there should have been a board meeting where they said, well, maybe that if we're really having to make this work, then we shouldn't do it at all, and there's probably a better idea for a theme park. Well,
the thing about the Disney Cruise Line is you only need a cruise ship's worth of attractions, on the thing. You don't need rides on a cruise ship. You just need. Yeah, I've never been on the Disney Cruise Line, so but basically it's just shows and various eateries and shops and activities, right? I mean there's no
right, but it's balanced. There's not. They don't shoehorn anything in because the point I was making is that it's an even spread of your characters and IPs.
Either way, you'd have to shoehorn in something, because your thing of well, what if the characters are visiting California? Well, then you're kind of shoehorning a trip to California into whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah, into what? So either way, it's kind of a square peg in a round hole. Right, which is what I was saying. I was like, that's why you shouldn't make the park. Like, you can make it work, but after all that, I don't know. I think that Disney could do, with the money, resources, and genius people they have, they could have made this park incredible, but at the end of the day, it's still themed after something that's not intriguing. Yeah.
I think that's also, like, to go back to the contemporary idea, like, I mean, I still think that at least it would have been a little more creative. I get what you're saying, like, it is still based on a state.
At the moment, it's based on a state in name only, basically. I mean, the thesis statement of this podcast episode is it still a California park? And it's really not anymore. Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, especially now that
everyone's realized that now. Yeah.
Yeah, especially now that Paradise Pier is turning into Pixar Pier, it's pretty much just Grizzly River Run, and that's it. That's like the only, that and Redwood Creek. That area is basically the only. And I guess ostensibly Hollywood, but there's not really any more Hollywood-centric attractions.
Yeah, but aren't they turning all that into Marvel Land?
I've heard conflicting reports. I've heard some people say that, all of Hollywood's being turned into Marvel Land, but I've heard other people say, no, they're going to extend Marvel Land the other direction and build it on, the last remaining shred of the parking lot and Bugs Land. Like, Bugs Land apparently is going away pretty soon.
Well, I mean, that's Bugs Land.
Yeah, who cares, exactly.
Who cares about a Bug's Life is one of the things that I talk a lot about on Defunctland is that we're hitting a variety of topics and points, I know, but sorry.
It's a podcast.
This is just like a conversation to have for fun, It's more of that than like an actual debate,
Well, it's good because we're agreeing, but the fact that A Bug's Land seems so stupid now, and like, that sounds ridiculous. Well, at one point, A Bug's Life was a movie that came out, and everybody was like, yeah, A Bug's Life. And that's why when I hear things like a Guardians of the Galaxy new attraction or a Ratatouille, even though I love the movie Ratatouille with a passion, is it going to hold up in 10 years? Are people going to remember it? Or are people going to look at that and be like, is that Ratatouille? Is that movie? So they have a land or a ride based off of A Bug's Land? And it just, that the idea seems stupid now, which is living proof of you have to pick your IPs with care if you choose to use IPs.
Absolutely. But I think A Bug's Life is kind of a special case in the sense that I don't think they needed a lot more kiddie stuff in DCA. They needed its own kiddie area. And I mean, aside from maybe, building a cheap-ass Toy Story land, which I honest. Well, no, wait. I mean, they built a Bugs Land because they already had It's Tough to Be a Bug there because they had cloned that. I think that's what happened. I mean, the
that wasn't built with a Bugs Land?
No, that was built with the park. Bugs Land came about a year and a half later.
Oh, okay.
But see, I disagree about Guardians of the Galaxy because, first of all, Guardians of the Galaxy already has a sequel that's been as big, if not a bigger hit. A sequel that's a huge hit in and of itself goes a long way towards, at least these days, goes a long way towards cementing a movie franchise as kind of an evergreen. And, Bug's Life didn't have that. Toy Story had that just 4 years later, pretty much out of the gate. Bug's Life never had that. So that's another strike against it. Now, I don't know if that's going to help Cars be all that great in the long term. I do think devoting, as much land as they did to the Cars franchise might turn out to be a bit of a mistake in the long run. But as for Guardians, I mean, have you seen the news that, after Guardians 3 in 2020 is going to lead to, 10 more years and like 20 more movies of Marvel, of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? This thing, this train's not going to end anytime soon. And I do think, it does behoove Disney to build a Marvel land. And if they're going to build it in California Adventure, I understand that because, they want it to complement Star Wars land. And why not, start with Guardians, as far as I'm concerned.
Guardians is just the most bizarre of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. I mean,
that's what I love about it. That's what the world loves about it.
Yeah, and it's self-aware. That's what I like about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's James Gunn. He does great. I mean, I love the movies, but to have them put into the park, why
not?
Because it feels weird. Because
Pirates, Haunted Mansion felt weird at first. Tower, that lots of rides feel weird at first. That's not a reason not to build them.
Okay, let me expand on why it feels weird. It feels weird because both times that they put them in the park has been odd placement. Redoing Tower of Terror, yes, and the counter argument is always, oh, it's amazing though. Okay, great. The Imagineers did something great with a weird idea. That's fantastic. They always do that. But why do we have to?
Not always. They.
Okay, fair, but most of the time you can't be surprised by it. Like when Avatar, I still think Avatar Land is a really weird idea, and that I don't love the inclusion. And then people said, "Oh my gosh, you have to be there and see it though." And yeah, it's great, but does that mean that that's what they best could have done with those resources?
Well, even with Avatar Land though, but even with Avatar Land, it's like, I know it's Animal Kingdom, but it's more of like, I guess, nature in general. I guess that's what they're trying to say with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, yeah, they had Joe Rogan get on camera and like explain it on commercials, and I bought it enough where I could be like, okay, so it's not completely out there, even though it has the same random religious than making a fictional religion as the Star Wars Holiday Special does,
right.
But which is so weird to me. But the Happy Life Day. But but Guardians of the Galaxy and California Adventure, that makes no sense unless they make a Marvel land. But right now it doesn't. And then they say, we're going to put Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster in Epcot. What? So if they would have said Hollywood Studios, I would have been like, cool, awesome. I wouldn't want them to replace Tower of Terror, but I would be like, whatever, because it's a movie and it's now in a park about movies, and I don't care. But the two placements are just so
well. In California Adventure, it's in a land about movies. So what's the difference? I mean, Hollywood, the Hollywood land in DCA was always, Diet Disney MGM.
So glaring, I think, is my thing. It's just so glaring and out there, and even though it's there, and they say wait till it's there and then see if it's still weird to me. I mean, and
here's why it's not weird to me is because I think the design, the design to me is very reminiscent of kind of how they designed sci-fi movies back in the 30s. It looks very Metropolis to me. It looks very,
like steampunk
space,
almost.
Yeah, the whole space Egypt concept.
What's it called? It's 20s. It's not steampunk, but it's Art Deco.
Victorian?
Art Deco.
Okay.
It's not exactly Art Deco, but it's definitely. I mean, I'm not an architecture expert, but to me, it looks like
It's probably more steampunk, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it does look kind of steampunk. Honestly, to me, what it looks like the most is it looks like something out of the aborted Tomorrowland 2055 concept that they used to float around back in the 90s, and it I don't know. I really do love the design of that building. And yeah, it does look a little out of place when you see it over the Carthay Circle Theater in Buena Vista Street. There it does kind of look out of place. I'm with you. Although, if Buena Vista Street is supposed to take place in 1923, seeing a hotel that was supposedly built in the 1930s, I mean that's even
okay, that is
anachronistic.
That is a much smaller stretch of the imagination than a giant sci-fi tower.
But I will say this: as you're entering the parks, either from either side, as you're in the Esplanade, it's a way better weenie nowadays. It's a way better thing to draw you into DCA, because frankly, back when it was the Tower of Terror, if you didn't know it was a ride, you could be forgiven for just thinking it was a hotel on Harbor Boulevard.
Yeah, it did look like just an abandoned building.
Yeah. I mean,
very weird one at that.
Now we have the other Tower of Terror now is an abandoned theme park. So I guess
yeah.
There you go.
I haven't been to. I went there a little bit ago, but I just don't remember it. So I'm personally very naive to what goes on in Florida. But yeah. It's more of like a question of like, what exactly is that, instead of just an abandoned building. It's like, oh, it's more bright, it's more colorful, it has all the tubes coming down, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna go check that out, whatever the heck it is,
And also, I mean, clearly neither of us are what would Walt have done cultists, and I respect that.
No.
But if you did want to get into the what would Walt have done-ness about it, Walt specifically kept the Haunted Mansion from looking decrepit from the outside. The Imagineers wanted to make it look like, this abandoned mansion with moss growing everywhere, and Walt insisted, no, it has to look beautiful and pristine from the outside, and then once you go inside, it's, wretched and abandoned, because he didn't want anything in his park to look unclean. Now, the Tower of Terror completely broke that rule. The Tower of Terror looks, and in Florida still looks, decrepit from the outside. So to turn it into something that does not look decrepit is actually more in line with Walt's dictums for the Haunted Mansion, at least.
Yeah, I guess I'm also not a what would Walt do, of course, person. I like to use him as inspiration, but I don't know. That's a really specific thing. As my friend Dave pointed out, it was an abandoned hotel, so it was only natural that it'd have a raccoon infestation. Nice.
but trees growing in it, yeah.
But but I honestly the idea of Guardians of the Galaxy, the IP, them putting IPs in these weird, odd places, Star Wars Land and Disneyland. I hate the idea of it. You haven't seen it yet. Okay, cool. I'm going to hate the idea of it when it comes out. I'm going to love what it is. You can never convince me that Star Wars Land should be on the same par as Frontierland and Adventureland. That should not be allowed. The Star Wars Land and Hollywood Studios.
Where they have room for it. I mean, it's a give and take between what would be ideal and what would be... what would be ideal and what is feasible? I mean, it's beyond the berm. To me, the fact that it's beyond the berm, to me, kind of signifies it as its own separate area. I mean, just like for Mickey's Toontown, just like for, Critter Country is really similar to Frontierland in a lot of ways, so that's kind of a different story. But, but to me, it's like Star Wars has always, in a sense, when Star Tours first opened, some of the Disney fans were saying, well, why is it in Tomorrowland if it takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away? Star Wars has always been way more of a fantasy story than a sci-fi story. It has almost nothing to do with the nuts and bolts of, sci-fi. It's all about using sci-fi tropes to tell basically a fairy tale. So I don't see so much the problem with it being closer to Fantasyland and even on the other side of Fantasyland.
Yeah. I guess we could just disagree on the idea of it.
Well, I think what you might be getting at, Kevin, is just how big it is and how it just hangs over Frontierland. Like, I mean, it's 14 acres. It's I think it's a weird. I have a huge problem with IPs. I really want, as you started talking about at the beginning of this, consistency and theming, and to have if you put Star Wars lands lined up with those, it's so out of place. If you wrote the lands down on a piece of paper and then put Star Wars land anywhere in that order, it's just out of place, and it ruins the theming. It's not just that it's weird if I'm walking, as someone that loves theme parks and goes to them as much as I do, that when I'm walking down a theme park and something says it's weird, it's not just, oh well, that's just Kevin because that's just what he thinks. It's you just ruin the theming of someone that loves these parks. Yeah, because I think you have to take into account like each land is basically a type of genre. I mean, Star Wars is basically a genre now, to be fair, considering how many movies they make. Yeah.
So, I mean, it really is. They greenlighted a TV show, a new trilogy, and a new part of the universe.
There's a TV show?
I heard about a live-action TV show that greenlit. That might have just been rumors, or it might have just been a joke on the internet.
Oh, yeah, because I have not heard about that. It's going to be like an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. type thing where they just have it as an offshoot.
I hope not. I just don't want it. Yeah, no, but anyways, but it's just, I don't know. Star Wars is a genre, I guess. If in that case, even it out, have Marvel Land in there.
They're building Marvel Land in the other park. That's how.
But don't put it in the other park. Put it in Disneyland.
They don't have room for it in Disneyland. We're going
make room. Dig. I don't care.
One of the original.
Put it underground.
If we go back, 3 months ago to when we started this podcast, one of the original points of this episode was, okay, so getting back to DCA, it's like, yeah, I mean, one of the big questions about DCA is, okay, it's clearly not a California park anymore.
Yeah, I think
Soarin' is not a California. Yeah. Soarin' isn't even based on California anymore. Now it's soaring around the world.
Don't get me started on that Soarin' thing.
Well, it's part of the park.
Soarin' over CGI.
The point is, California is the park's it's a California park in name only. Pretty much everything that was explicitly California about it, with the sole exception of Grizzly Peak, is being changed or will be changed or has already been changed. So the question is, what is the new theme? What distinguishes Disneyland from DCA? And I recently did a video about, the Pixar peer developments where I kind of asked that question myself, and I say, it sucks that Disney is afraid to experiment more. It sucks that they, have basically turned every park into kind of a grab bag of various different things. But at the end of the day, if the experiments they're going to try are, the park that takes place in the state we're already in, I'd rather have more of the winning formula, and that was my point. But someone in the comments actually made a really excellent point to me. He said, the difference now between Disneyland and Disney California Adventure, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's like Disneyland is more about actually going to fantastical places that don't really exist in the real world, or if they do, they're not easily accessible. Whereas California Adventure is more about finding the fantastical in the more mundane. It's more about, because Marvel Land, the Marvel Cinematic Universe supposedly takes place in the real world, where there just happens to be all this, sci-fi superhero gobbledygook. Whereas Star Wars very clearly takes place in, a galaxy far, far away a long time ago. Cars Land, it's just, a normal place along Route 66, but the cars happen to be alive. Even something like Grizzly Peak. It's like it's just a mountain. We've got all sorts of them here in California, but if you go for a whitewater rafting trip on that mountain, it can turn into a big adventure. It's more like DCA is about finding the adventure in the mundane. Disneyland Park is about going off and finding the fantastical in completely fantastical places. So that, I think, is a good distinction. And if they really played that up and they called it something other than Disney California Adventure, if they didn't tie it so, if they just dropped the title and called it something else, I don't know what they would call it. Maybe, The Adventures of Disney's Adventure or something, because they put the word adventure into everything nowadays. But that's kind of my take on it.
I would agree. They would have to really play it up. I think that would be the way to salvage it with the materials given. If I was like, okay, here I pressed shuffle on intellectual property. Now find a pattern and make 2 parks out of it. I would like, and this doesn't work anymore because Star Wars Land is going to be it's going to be Star Wars, which means it's going to be a kind of grungy. It's going to be a lived-in universe. So this doesn't work, but it would be nice. One of the original ideas that was thrown around for California Adventure was the Villains Park, right? You guys hear about this?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard rough things about this. Yeah,
completely speculated. I don't know if there's ever any concept art for it or anything at all. Just the idea that if you want to be. Heroes Park is Disneyland, but then all the villains live in the park across the way, and that it's like the darker park. I think that would be cool with California Adventure. You'd have to change everything, but Guardians of the Galaxy is more of it's a greasy, dirty world, and it works. You have all of these things that are too filthy for Disneyland, and not filthy as in vulgar, filthy as in literally filthy. And I think
but you could say that but the exact same thing was true of Tower of Terror.
Right, so I guess they didn't need to change it.
Well,
I mean, that's not what I'm saying. It's just, and I was not a huge advocate for keep Tower of Terror in Disney California Adventure. The one in Florida is enough. If you get rid of a copy of a park, a copy of an attraction, I'm not going to get mad unless you get rid of one that's better in another park. It's just, I don't know. The California Adventure is a mess. It's just a mess, and I feel like the decisions for the IPs are just not good ones, and it's because of a lot of legal issues with using Marvel and theme parks. Although I didn't think those issues applied to California. I don't know enough about the legal system.
They apply in the sense that they can't use the Marvel logo on pretty much anything. They can't put the Marvel logo if they build Marvel, or when they build Marvel Land rather. They can't call it Marvel Land. That's why they called the summer event this past year Summer of Heroes. They couldn't call it Marvel Celebration Time or something. They had to keep Marvel out of it. That's the one restriction of California, is that I think worldwide, or at least nationwide, Universal has the title right to put Marvel on something. But as for actually building attractions based on these characters, Disney's free to do that on the West Coast.
Free to do it like worldwide too, because they already have an Iron Man experience.
They're free to do it outside of Florida. Yeah.
And they're calling it something like superhero, or what's it called? Superhero experience.
Is that what they're calling? Oh, man.
I think it's like calling orange flavored soda orange drink, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And don't forget to pick up some superhero experience for the long trip home.
Yeah,
that sounds like a horrible car salesman ad. Like your iron superhero car dealer for all of your metal. He's the Transformer, something dumb like that. Anyways, here's a question. I've been trying to wrap my brain around. Why exactly I don't think Guardians of the Galaxy is going to age well as an attraction. But why do attractions why do the other attractions why do other attractions age well? Based on IPs. So even if we just assume that Guardians of the Galaxy is going to be relevant for the next 10 or 20, 30 years. That might be a stretch, but let's just say it is. There's a video with actors, real life actors, in their prime, that they're going to look a lot different in 10 to 20 years. And I'm trying to think. I'm thinking, well, when Universal Studios Florida opened in 1990, you had Jaws, King Kong, you had all these attractions based on movies that are outdated, that were dated and outdated definitely by the time they all closed, but still people loved them, and it wasn't like, oh, this is such an outdated attraction. You didn't have real people. And then I thought, well, maybe if they still had Ghostbusters Spooktacular today, and you went in it and you saw Bill Murray talking to you, how weird that would be, and how that would immediately take you out of it, because Bill Murray from 1980 whatever would be talking to you, and Dan Aykroyd and all the Ghostbusters. And they have this, right? They have, in Men in Black Alien Attack, they have young Will Smith at the end. And I when I saw this, I was like, whoa, Will Smith looks young. So are they going to update the video? Are they? Does that make sense? How when it ages, it's going to look more dated because these are real people and not characters, not just characters.
Yeah,
well,
I'm trying to think of an example of that. Maybe Star Tour. Well, there's Indiana Jones. They still
but
have
Harrison
young Indiana
Ford.
Jones. Yeah.
Harrison Ford didn't do the voice in the Indiana Jones.
Yeah, but it's still his likeness in the animatronics. So
yeah, but the likeness in animatronics is different than seeing a video. Because if Han Solo, if Harrison Ford in 19 what year did they come out Star Tours?
86 or something.
87. Yeah. If Harrison Ford from that year shows up in the Millennium Falcon and peeks his head out and be like, "Hey, let's go," that would be kind of weird. You'd be like, "Whoa, Harrison Ford."
That'd be weird anyway.
Well, it'd be weird anyways, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But
you know what? If they had done that. Honestly, well, I mean, first of all, they would have changed it in 2011 anyway, but if they had done that, honestly, I just think that would be awesomely nostalgic. I just think it was like, hey, it's young Harrison Ford. Part of the appeal of these parks is that they are about nostalgia, and it's always that push and pull between nostalgia and progress. I mean, you still hear, Paul Frees has been dead for decades, but you still hear his voice on Pirates and Haunted Mansion. I mean, and I know that's different because he's playing. I mean, I know that's different because you don't see him, and he was more known for his voice and all that. I do get what you're saying about how weird it's going to be to see a 30-something Chris Pratt at your theme park in 30 years from now.
Right, and that's exactly what I'm saying. In that Harrison Ford's, I'll give that example, maybe even too different, because Star Wars has an intense, uncomparable nostalgia to it. Right. Guardians of the Galaxy might not have that same intense, comparable nostalgia, especially when we get out of the age of the Marvel vomiting 4 movies on you every year, because after that culture shock wears off, I don't know how it's going to last. Are we going to remember the individual movies and characters? Or are we going to remember this crazy big universe that was awesome and had all these characters and all these movies? Or are we really going to remember Peter Quill, Chris Pratt?
I think so.
You think so?
I do think so. I think it's one of the more it's one of the more memorable parts of this whole enterprise. It's all this stuff, culture. I do think it will still retain its cultural ripple. Now, it was risky of them because when they built the ride, they built the ride at the same time they were making the movie, so they couldn't have known it would be that big a cultural signifier. But I do think it was, and I do think it will go down in history as such.
Yeah, the question is though, it's because we all three of us agree that the California theme, whether we like it or not, is basically chucked out the window. So really the question is what exactly is the idea here? And we've already kind of gone over, maybe the dark universe or something like that, which is interesting. I was thinking because all the progress that they made so far was basically signaling towards a Pixar land, basically, until Marvel Land was announced. So it's you were so close to just getting that little Pixar thing. And even with Pixar Pier, it would have made sense. But I don't know. The Marvel Land seems to have, at least for the sake of coherency with the theming, threw the cog in that idea.
Well, honestly, that wasn't the whole, gradual Pixarification of DCA was not overtly intentional. It's just that's the only thing Disney had going for them in the 2000s. Pixar was basically the only thing that whole decade that was consistently saving the studio's ass. This was before they bought Marvel, before they bought Lucasfilm. Disney feature animation was floundering and producing crap like Chicken Little, where Pixar was producing hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. It's like, well, what else do you put into your floundering theme park? Pixar just saved their asses over and over again with, Bugs Land and Monsters Inc. and Pixar Play Parade and Toy Story Mania and, of course, Cars Land. And it's just, and yeah, it basically, but that's not necessarily intentional. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I imagine that there's like progress and that they're not really thinking about that at the time. But it seemed like let's say if I were looking at the theme park this year or maybe 2012, knowing that I'm going to put in Cars Land and possibly the Pixar Pier, would it make more sense to actually, okay, we're going to put our hands up, let's go with the Pixar theming for the entire thing? Because I was thinking about this the other day, you could potentially turn that the Grizzly River run, change the rocks up a little bit into that volcano from Incredibles.
Well, what I want them to do, I mean, they'll never do it, but I'd love if they turned Grizzly River Run into Gravity Falls. I mean, that would be the best right there. But and from what I understand, around the time they started, stacking up Pixar, you realize when DCA opened, it had one Pixar attraction. It's Tough to Be a Bug, and that was it. And for the rest of it, and as they kept piling up, more and more Pixar attractions, they did start to ask, well, should we just turn this into Pixar Land? And apparently at the time, Lasseter's big objection to that was, well, if we do change it into Pixar Land, if we do put the Pixar name on the entire park, then you have to get rid of this generic ride and this generic ride and this generic ride, and I don't like that, and we got to change and basically, it would have been cost prohibitive to meet Lasseter's demands. Although now, of course, Lasseter's not in as much of a position to demand things. So who knows?
Because
who knows if
he was in a position to demand things way more than we thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows if Lasseter is even going to still be at Pixar a year from now? So it'll be interesting, but I guess if they were going to do that, they did kind of screw themselves over by insisting that Marvel would go there. I mean, remember when the big rumor was that they were going to build a third gate for Marvel stuff? Because they didn't want to, that's what I thought. That's what I thought the reason must have been why, it took them, excuse me, why it took them 8 whole years to open a single Marvel ride after they bought the damn thing.
Yeah, the idea to turn everything into Pixar, I don't think they would ever do that. Because that's very limiting. And because California is also limiting, but it's not limiting to business. Pixar could fail. Pixar is a brand that could go downhill. And then with that, you're not allowed to put in Wreck-It Ralph. And you're not allowed to put in a lot of these other CGI or other animated films that you want to in a situation where you have a huge success somewhere else. And as we know, Disneyland's really limited, so you have to build an attraction based off this, and now, we can't because we can only use Pixar films in this park. So I don't think that would ever happen like that. I just feel like that couldn't happen based on business practices alone.
That is true. It would be limiting for them in that regard.
Yeah, you could probably just do like animation in general, but then again, you have animation over in the other park. Like,
yeah,
what do you do at that point? So I mean, that's like the really question. We gotta like be armchair Imagineers here. It's like, what is the best course of action? Do you think, or is it just all arms up in the air at this point?
Oof.
Because it's really hard to like subtract a certain theme from everything that's been going on. It's just basically like, whatever land,
And I'm fine with whatever land if you, as I said earlier, do an even spread of whatever. Give me some bizarre stuff. Where's my Treasure Planet attraction?
That would be sick, honestly.
Yeah.
Where's my George of the Jungle starring Brendan Fraser? Give me some weird stuff.
Not so much.
Yeah. Apparently, after the George of the Jungle Brendan Fraser movie did well, there was serious talk of the George of the Jungle cruise.
No,
no.
really, that's fantastic.
I know,
love
yeah,
that
be
idea.
So be careful what you wish for, buddy.
Yeah, I know, because then I'm gonna have to defend. I'm gonna have to make sure the Jungle Cruise doesn't close. But by standing at my computer and yelling into the screen.
That'd just be like the room of theme park attractions.
I love the room.
No. Yes, the room is amazing. Everyone knows that, but I mean, it's just that it's so bad that it's amazing. Like it's a
So Six Flags, basically.
Yeah. Honestly, like I mean, Six Flags.
Or it's Paramount Kings Island.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's random, and
or Cedar Fair after they've put their fingers in anything.
Yeah, that'll get us on a way longer tangent. Or it's just Universal. It's Universal. Universal has really weird stuff. I mean, they got Minions across the street from Transformers. Who cares?
Well, that works more because like it's the excuse of like really, if you want to just put random shit in everything, just basically make it a studio. That's
it's a
basically
movie.
what you have to do.
It's about movies. Just it's a movies. There's your movies. Who cares? I mean, that's why Hollywood studios, and I stand by this. My biggest armchair Imagineer would be keep all of the normal Hollywood studios, keep all the buildings, keep all the retro Hollywood stuff, and then on the different lands, you walk through a movie camera, and then you're in Star Wars land. You go into the movie. You put Avatar there. Absolutely. Avatar made the most money. Yeah, it was a fluke. Yeah, nobody remembers it, but it's cemented itself in cinematic history for that reason. You walk through a camera and there you are. Then you go into Toy Story Land. Huge.
Through a camera.
You got a giant camera.
Well, why not?
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that kind of the point of the great movie ride is that you're walking into a movie theater, which of course that's not open anymore, so.
Yeah. Right, you got rid of that, so there's no problem.
Yeah, you don't. But from the viewer's point of view, you don't watch movies through cameras. You watch them on screens. So I don't know. That's
pretty technical.
Maybe we're overthinking.
Yeah, so it's like,
and it was just a random idea I had, but also but you know what I mean. That would be my idea, to have the hub be old Hollywood, and then have the lands be the different movie franchises. Yeah.
Originally, when Disneyland opened, that's kind of what it was originally. It was kind of the original version of what you're saying about Disney Hollywood Studios. It was just kind of a bunch of movies brought to life. That was the fundamental, mission statement of it, was a theme park presented through the lens of the manipulative filmmaker. And every land, like you said, is basically just a different genre. And why not Star Wars in its own way? In fact, when they were building Disneyland and the whole thing was completely up in the air as to whether or not it would be a success, and the bankers started asking, well, if this fails, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with all this stuff you built? And the plan B they came up with was, we're going to turn it into a studio backlot. If this fails as a theme park, we're just gonna make this our own version of the Universal lot and just shoot all our movies here. And so to me, it's not that much of a stretch. It's not that much of a. The difference is that Hollywood studios really, let's be honest here, just to save money, was much more about the nuts and bolts making of the movies, whereas Disneyland was all about pushing you into the movies. When Disney Hollywood Studios first opened, it was just about it was half of it, when you entered, it was all about old-timey Hollywood, and then you had Star Tours and all that. But otherwise, the park was all, backlot tour, and, here's a set that looks like New York, but it's clearly a set, that was a nice effect if you're into that sort of thing. But let's be honest, they built it that way to save money. They built it that way so they wouldn't have to build real buildings quite so much. They built it so that the place could double as an actual movie studio, which it failed there because no one wanted to shoot with tourists looking at them, but that's another story. And it's so I don't see as much of a difference between the two, especially now that Hollywood Studios has abandoned the behind-the-scenes part of it and is just kind of making it, it's basically just another Disneyland where we're building Star Wars Land and they're building Toy Story Land, and it's much more about taking you inside various movies. Well, to me, that's what Disneyland is too.
And I can't get there with the live action stuff. It's just the live action. Even Star Tours in Disneyland feels weird to me. Feels wrong. Still, I mean, it's always been there now, but it still feels wrong to have live action in that park, because live action, as fantasy as it is, it feels real because you could see it and it's people. But you can never meet Mickey Mouse. You can never meet.
Well, there's a lot of live action in
Frontierland,
too, though.
Like you look at something like Adventureland or Frontierland, like that's all live action. That was based on the westerns Walt was making at the time. That's all, or
like the African Queen and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was based on the African Queen. You could go to Frontierland and actually meet Davy Crockett for a while when it first opened. To me, it's not nearly as much of a stretch. Fantasyland,
but those things exist, and that's that. I know it sounds crazy. I'm just trying to explain why me and a large population of people find it so out of place to have it there, is because Davy Crockett is a person. It's not a stretch. Han Solo and Luke Skywalker and all of these characters that George Lucas created.
Well, Indiana Jones is a real or is a fictional character, and that's been in Adventureland for 20 years now. I mean, I
also agree that feels weird.
Well, I think you're making arbitrary distinctions here that don't have. I mean, what about the pirates? What about the pirates in Pirates of the Caribbean?
I don't like that Johnny Depp is in the attraction.
Well, what about the original pirates?
The original is fine.
Well, why do you accept that that's a live action setting? And because one, it's a very cartoonish version of a pirate raid, but also sort of. I mean, it's sort of cartoonish.
I think the bigger issue I think we're trying to get at is maybe that it's weird that it's one, because Pirates is not, because even though it's based on the African Queen and stuff, Adventureland is still Adventureland, still its own thing. New Orleans Square is still its own thing. It's not like Pirates of the Caribbean land. We're going to have basically Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So I think that's what Kevin's arguing for, is that
it's what I'm arguing.
IP.
Yes, it is one IP that overtakes everything, and I think it's more than fair to point out that Walt Disney and all the men and women working under Walt Disney had a very specific style and a very specific way of going about things. And then to put George Lucas's very different, also brilliant style into the same park under the same theme feels out of place. And I feel as artists, Walt Disney and George Lucas, if it feels the same and feels well implemented to the eye through that view, then neither of them did their job as auteurs. But they both did. And so it's clashing in that way. It's like trying to implement I can't even think of an example. It's trying to implement Wes Anderson's style into Star Wars, a Star Wars movie.
That would be awesome.
I'd
love to see that.
That would be so different. And yes, it'd be interesting to see, but I wouldn't want someone to be like, every time you want to watch a movie, you have to watch this movie, which is what theme parks are. You can take risks in other forms of mediums, but in other mediums of art, but in theme parks, you can also, of course, take risks, but the risks last a lot longer. Well, in the sense that they can't just disappear unless they're Superstar Limo and you can close it after a couple of months.
Right. Well, that is kind of the nature of the beast. That is, and I understand why theme park fans are a lot more possessive of their medium than that kind of thing. Because you can't just take out a DVD and ride the original pre-Johnny Depp version of Pirates.
We're trying. We're working on it over here at Defunctland, but now,
the VR.
Yeah, well, so I do understand that, but there's a statement that I wish I could take credit for, that Disney park fans all want the park to stay exactly as it was when Mommy and Daddy were still together. And the thing is that the other nature of the beast is that as time progresses, the park, more and more little kids visit the park, and more, and the park has always been kind of a hodgepodge. It's always just been on whatever we can afford and what we can build at the moment. And yeah, the styles are going to clash and the styles are going to intermingle with each other, but that's the nature of the business because, Walt is dead. Walt's been dead for 50 years. Most of his artists have been dead for decades now, so you're going to bring new people in there because the park's not a museum. New things have to replace the old things, and yeah, the style is going to evolve and the styles are going to clash with each other, but that's just kind of how things work. I guess I just don't see a reasonable way to not do that without just completely turning it into a museum and saying nothing can ever change here, which violate. I mean, again, I'm not a what would Walt have done cultist, but his primary, the reason for the season, as it were, for building his parks was, I want a project that will never be finished. And that's a big part of the whole point.
Well, would you say you're on like the same wavelength as Rob plays? I don't know if you've seen any of his videos or not, but like he's kind of in the extreme opposite direction of like the what would Walt do people. He's like progress. Like
I'm not opposed to nostalgia. I do think I'm certainly not a nothing is sacred type guy. I'm kind of in the middle. I do think some things are sacred. I don't think you can
bulldoze the castle.
You can't bulldoze the castle. You can't.
As much as Disneyland needs it, you can't do that.
You can't completely turn, Pirates of the Caribbean into something else. You can enhance these things. You can turn. You can't just, you can't just. I mean, you can't just turn the Haunted Mansion ride into a ride based on the Eddie Murphy Haunted Mansion movie. You can't put. It's like that would cross a line for me.
But how is that any different than Pirates of the Caribbean?
Because Pirates of the Caribbean was a better movie. Now, maybe that's an arbitrary distinction of my own devising, but
it's definitely more successful.
But if Haunted Mansion was a more successful movie, you'd be fine with it.
No, I wouldn't, because it's not as good a movie.
No, but if it was,
it'd be a completely different movie. So that's a whole different other reality. And I mean, look, okay. In a sense, we both have our own arbitrary distinctions, and that's fundamentally where we differ, apparently. And it's just that I mean, we both have our lines, and they just seem to be in different places. But I don't know. It's like I do think I try not to be too firmly on either extreme. I do think there are certain things at the park that shouldn't be changed, and otherwise, it's like, the area where they're building Star Wars Land, they've been hoping to build something back there since the 70s. At one point, it was going to be, they built a whole, the whole Discovery Island ride based on Island at the top of the world, which ended up flopping, so they never built it. And then just decades after decades, well, maybe we'll do this, well, maybe we'll do that. Now they're finally doing something. So, to me, as far as I'm concerned, theming isn't as big a be-all, end-all for me as just making sure the park has as much great stuff as possible. And Star Wars Land looks like it'll be a lot of fun. So I don't want to deny myself. I don't want to just, cross my arms and, and frown and go, this is bullshit over a really fun ride just because it doesn't fit theming. To me, theming is much more of it's not unimportant, but it's more of a garnish as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and you think you could probably tie that back into the DCA with the Marvel Land? Is that kind of the same situation?
Yeah, it is kind of the same situation. Pretty much exactly, yeah. So, sorry we went so far off topic there.
Well, to stay off topic here in a sec, I'll just give my little rebuttal to that. The idea that I'm not a what would Walt do person. When Disneyland opened, I'm not saying where's the World of Bras, where's the Monsanto Hall of Chemistry. This is ridiculous. That's not what I'm saying. The attractions that closed are interesting in the fact that they closed for a reason, and that's what my whole thing is. We talk about why attractions closed, and it's interesting because there's always a unique reason for every attraction, it seems. And then you learn from that, and you don't repeat those mistakes. I'm not saying that I don't want any new ideas coming to Disney parks. In fact, I want new ideas. And as people, genius, creative people are putting their hard work into making experiences for us to experience, and they haven't done something in these parks that is new and not based off of something in 12 years, and then I'm forced to see a Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster in Epcot, and because I'm like, well, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. Good idea, guys. No, that's ridiculous. That's a bad idea, because there are things that can be done, and I don't care how amazing it is. You base it off of something that I don't think is a good start. You didn't start good. And I think that if they would just come up with an original idea, it would be amazing. Everybody would love it. Why are there 5 Pirates of the Caribbean movies? Because there was an attraction. And yes, they didn't follow them, but it started with the parks. Haunted Mansion, same thing.
I mean,
there's original ideas.
Yeah, this is like what I wanted to get into also, because like I was explaining to Kevin while you're gone, it's like this is kind of what you guys are kind of diametrically opposed to, or our opposition, where it's like, Tony, I remember you saying like we're a minority here, the people who actually are following this extensively and what the futures of the park is be, but it really matters of what the people want. And I think I think Kevin is saying, oh, they don't really know what they want until they've seen it.
Absolutely.
And look, that's absolutely true, that people often don't know what they want till they've seen it. But the thing is, I think the same thing is happening with people who are absolutely anti-IP, is that they refuse. You just said yourself, you're not giving the Guardians of the Galaxy coaster a fair shot because you don't like where it's starting. How is that any different from someone being turned off to something just because it's an original idea? Because the difference between a good idea and a bad idea is not the same thing as the difference between an original idea and an unoriginal idea. There can be really good unoriginal rides. I think Mission Breakout is one of them. There can be really bad quote-unquote original rides. I think Superstar Limo was one of them. I mean, if you want to consider that original, and
yeah, and I think that's fair. But at the same time, it's also that I'm not just saying like, oh, that's a bad idea, that's a good idea, that's a bad idea. I don't complain as much about the Ratatouille ride at Epcot because it's in France, and Ratatouille is a movie set in France. That sounds like a good start. Why do we have a Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster in Future World in Epcot?
Well, James Gunn specifically said on Twitter that that the way they're doing the Guardians ride is very much based on Walt's original ideals for Epcot. Now, what that means, we don't know yet, but he said something along the lines of, I think it's absolutely in line with Walt's vision and couldn't be more so. Now, is that just the company line at the moment? Maybe. But I'm personally inclined to trust him because I don't see a reason not to. I don't know what the hell they're doing with Guardians. I don't know. Frankly, I don't quite see how they could make it so in line with Walt's vision that it couldn't be more so. But maybe they'll find a way. I don't know. I'm not privy to the goings on there, and I think it's a mistake to assume that we are.
No, I'm not assuming that I know what's going on. And I think that they could absolutely fit that in line with Walt's vision. Because Walt's vision was rather vague in a lot of ways. So you can definitely tweak anything to be within that vision, because it's not like he laid out his 100-year plan for the parks. Yeah, you can totally do that. And they're going to. But that doesn't mean that's where this idea started. I think it started from the wrong place. Maybe
does it matter where it started?
Yeah, I think so. I
don't. To me, it's all about, is it a great ride when it opens, and to a lesser extent, yeah, does it fit the theming? Does it fit within the structure of this park? And to that extent, Mission Breakout doesn't so much. But like I said, to me, that's a garnish.
But we differ on theming, but that ideal, the idea of where something start lingers. The Force Awakens, for example, did that start as we want to make a new Star Wars movie because we have a really great idea and we think it's really going to impact moviegoers? It's really going to have a fun idea. No, it started, we just bought Star Wars, we're going to make a ton of money, Let's figure out how to do this so the fans don't kill us. And did they put heart into it? Yes. Did they put art into it? Absolutely. Did it still, at points, feel as though that this movie was made for money and not for its original intended purpose? Yes, and I think the ride at Guardians of the Galaxy was started for the wrong purpose, and that is absolutely important. Why was this put in there? I talk about this a lot on my podcast and Defunctland. It's instant gratification, and instant gratification is bad in a lot of ways, and it's gratifying. Don't get me wrong, but instant gratification is, what do you like right now? Oh, you like Guardians of the Galaxy? You want to go see that movie? Well, they're going to go on a ride. There you go. Oh, it's amazing. They did such a great job. Cool. You're satisfied for now. Is that going to last? Is that something that you asked for, or is that something that we gave you? And that's the difference. And it's the audience asking, hey, we like the Marvel movies. Give us Marvel stuff. Here you go. It's you're feeding your audience instead of like making a healthy meal for them to eat and showing them how good it can be when it's done right and carefully. Instead, the audience is yelling, I want a Snickers bar. And then you're like, here you go. That's not healthy. That's not how you parent an audience, in my opinion.
Well, wait a minute. Who says the Disney parks have to be parents? Who says, they're...
It's a metaphor to an audience. It's not literal parents.
I mean, I don't know.
I'm not. What? Why use that metaphor?
Yeah.
Because it's a metaphor. Because you use metaphors to explain points.
All of this is about, entertaining the audience. All of this ostensibly is about, giving them what they want. Granted, they don't always know what they want before they get it. But to me, intent doesn't matter to me nearly as much as execution. And maybe that's where we fundamentally differ, is that...
No, I agree that execution matters more, but intent lingers.
Not so much to me, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, I think we've got just to interject here, I think this is where we're finally finding where we're differing, because Kevin is more or less emphasizing the point that intent lingers, whereas Tony's like, it's not as much as long as it's execution. It's not that you both don't believe in execution. It's just that I think that Kevin sees kind of the underlying principle of what might happen if the company has that mindset.
And you know what? Maybe this is the result of me being more cynical and fundamentally viewing literally every transaction of that or every element that goes into a Disney park as yet another way to make money. Maybe because I see that intent in absolutely everything, I just learn to stop worrying and love the bomb or something.
Yeah. And
that extends throughout entertainment in general. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you got to make money off your art. And
I'm not necessarily saying it's a terrible thing to make money. It's just that's kind of the reality of it.
No, it's not. It's never a horrible thing. But whether Walt Disney wanted to make Disneyland, and I'm again trying not to be a Walt Disney purist here, but he created the spark of magic that we all love today, and it's important to realize why we love it and why that worked. Is that whether he set out behind closed doors and said, okay, we're going to make a lot of money off this idea, or he said, I really want to make this place where families can go because that's what I believe in. Either way, it doesn't matter, because he marketed it as we're going to make this place where families want to go, and it's going to be a magical experience. It's not about the money. And I think that idea of how you market yourself and how it appears, because you're right, Tony, I'm not behind the scenes. I don't know what's going on. But when I see something that so obviously looks like they're trying to make money, it loses them a little bit of magic for me. And I don't think that's me saying that you're wrong, or that's not anybody's wrong. That's me. That's my personal opinion, that I feel that when I see something so blatantly a money grab, everything, sure, you could argue that Disneyland was the original money grab for theme parks. Fantastic. But that's not how they marketed themselves. They marketed it as magic, and they covered up that money grab. The money grabs are getting more and more obvious, in my opinion.
Well, they still do. They use magic in their I did a whole montage in one of my episodes where I took a one of those free Disney World, Disneyland vacation planning DVDs, and I went through the whole thing, and I picked out every instance where they said the word magic, and I strung them together into like a full minute of just magic, 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 magical, magical, magical magic, you know, and it was one of the most excruciating things I've ever edited together, and it's pretty hilariously excruciating to sit through, but yeah, I mean, and maybe in forcing it down people's throats, they're kind of diluting that message, but that is still how they sell themselves. Now, maybe the problem is that the culture has just gotten more cynical. Maybe because of partly of internet culture, and people have a much stronger grasp of, you know, why these things are actually made. It's like, you know, back in the day, I mean, I'm going to use movies as the example here, but back in the day, before the internet existed, unless you like regularly read Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, you didn't know anything about, you know, behind the scenes deal making type stuff. Now everyone knows about it. And so maybe that's the problem, is that Disney's not quite adjusting itself to that to that kind of audience that has come to expect more, because we tend to know a little more about how the sausage is made.
The culture is just more postmodern.
Maybe that's the issue.
And they announced bringing back the Skyway as a connection between Hollywood Studios and Epcot. Is that right?
Something like that, but as like, you know, enclosed gondolas and all that sort of thing. So,
and that might have been a little nod to the "we know that you're out there" kind of thing. But it's just, you have a huge fan base, and the fan base, it seems, can either drive something or can be ignored. And I feel as though the theme park fan base is being more ignored and being more told, "Shut up. You're not the Imagineers."
Well,
Shut
they're
up.
not being they're not being ignored. I think they're just kind of they're being pandered to is what it is. They release when the electrical parade comes back, and they release that commercial with that warehouse full of old abandoned props and settings from former Disneyland attractions that used to exist. Like that's pandering to that hardcore audience. But maybe what you're saying is that what the hardcore audience really wants is just fewer IPs, and we don't want to be reminded of it so much. But honestly, that does seem to be fundamentally in culture what people want is nostalgia.
That's true. I would completely agree with that, is that we are on a nostalgia binge right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what my entire channel is about.
Yeah.
But so I am all for that binge continuing and prospering. But at the same time, attractions lose something for me when they're based off of something, and in a lot of ways. And I love Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger spins. Yeah, it's based off of the Buzz Lightyear and Emperor's Zurg, but it doesn't use any of the movie elements. And same thing with Mission Breakout and those kind of rides, I guess. And I applaud Mission Breakout for not just being a rehash of the movies. But at the same time, I think that, as I was saying earlier, that the theme park that we keep saying, can we have something original, please? And still, Expedition Everest was the last thing we got. Years. The
last big e-ticket. I mean,
okay, yeah, we have a little experiences and maybe a few shows.
Yeah.
If that, can you name any other attraction that's been added that's been new?
I don't think in the States.
Yeah, in the States, big ones. I don't think, not since Everest.
Yeah, I mean, and not just big ones. Any attractions, and I don't know if there are. And that's a long time.
Well, it depends on what you mean by attractions. I mean, it's
okay. Well, give me an example of something that's been produced since Everest.
I'm trying to think. I mean, yeah, it is difficult because, and part of it is that Disney just has so many other successful IPs these days. I mean, you look at back in the '80s when they were, they really had their hopes set on the Black Cauldron being a huge moneymaker, and nothing was working for them, so they had to license stuff from other studios, and that. I don't know where I was going with that, but
I understand kind of. I think your point is that they have a lot. You know, they have Pixar, they have their own CGI animation, they have a lot of stuff. And back before the Disney Renaissance, during the Disney Renaissance, when most of those original attractions were coming out, it was a lot easier to be like, well, let's not base something off of a movie that failed. Let's base off of nothing. Is that kind of what you're saying? And I would agree.
Technically, I mean, depends on your definitions, I guess. Technically, the new Soarin' is original. It's not based on an IP. I mean, yeah, it's just a different version of the original ride, but you know, aside from visiting either Disneyland or Epcot at the end, it's still, you know, based on the real locations of the world, as opposed to, say, the fictional locations of, you know, Star Wars or Marvel Land or something.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. It's still it's just a redo of the video, but
right.
Point being is that as someone that has, you know, we have a community of people that love these theme parks and appreciate it as an art form. I find it really annoying, you know, to be told, you know, like I was saying earlier, shut up, don't be an armchair Imagineer. This is not how you're supposed to experience these parks. While the movies, like Star Wars, man, they listened to every complaint that everybody made about the prequels when they made The Force Awakens. Every single one. And they listened to that weird, hardcore fan base that I love, and they listened to them, and they're like, okay, we're going to avoid all those problems in The Force Awakens. And they did. But that's movies. But you're not allowed to love theme parks like this, in this way. You're not allowed to complain about theme parks.
Oh, I completely
you're not allowed
disagree.
I agree. I agree with being allowed to complain, but I feel that's the sentiment being thrown at the theme park community.
I don't think so, because I mean, you talk about how, you know, the producers of Force Awakens listen to all the complaints about, you know, about the prequels. Well, bringing this back to the topic at hand, I think the new DCA, you know, changes for the most part are largely in response to people's complaints about DCA 1.0. People were complaining, oh, it's too much about California. Well, here's a bunch that have nothing to do with California. You know, people were saying, oh, there's not enough thrill rides. Well, here's a couple more thrill rides. It's like, I don't know, or it's too cheap. Well, we're pouring a shitload of money into this ride and this ride and this ride. You know, it's.
Well, were they really complaining about it not being too California, because when they expect that anyway?
I mean, those are people. I mean, you said yourself, Kevin, that you have an issue with the idea of a California park in California in general because it's too limiting.
Well, right, but I wouldn't.
So they're just breaking down. They're just saying, okay, we don't have that limit anymore. Here's a Guardians ride.
Yeah, but my complaint was the idea that began with, not necessarily the execution again, but the execution also wasn't the best. No, but I mean, if they would, I would never complain if they're like, hey, it's a ride about California in a California park, and be like, damn it, give me something different. You know, the idea of the park is dumb.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, no, I get it. I feel that sentiment is thrown a lot at the theme park community of don't talk like that. Just you're there to experience it. Don't be these super fans. And I'm not aiming that at either of you by any means.
Yeah, this is if this is a phenomenon that's been happening, it's completely eluded me. So
it's intentional. Like, I mean, I think it's just that they're looking at the wider audience in general, and it's more of an ignoring rather than a talking down to.
I mean,
also some talking down to.
Everyone's allowed
I haven't
to
heard
criticize.
What would be an example of the talking down?
Just some conversations I've had with some employees in the theme park industry. Wonderful people that come on the podcast, but just kind of, talk to you like that a little bit. Just different podcast guests that have just been, you're there to experience it. You're not there to love it. I mean,
but those are executives, though.
Okay, why does that matter?
Well, because it's like, they're not the ones making the decisions. They're not the ones that have to look at the general audience. They're just in there. I
was talking about this in a completely different way. I was just talking about that sentiment in general why the theme park community matters.
Like the executives are actively like, oh.
No, the executives don't. No, they're definitely no. They're not trying to like take away their fans by any means.
It's the actual culture that there's like a talking down
But-
to. I kind of
Well,
get
it's
that
culture.
a little
I mean,
bit, but it's
you know,
more of,
I'm just saying that
more
this
from
the,
naivety, I guess. I don't know.
well, the niche is looked at as people that love the parks. You know, they're labeled things such as, you know, Disney purists, whatever, you know, anything, any change you get mad at, stuff like that. And that's not necessarily true. You got to give me something else. You can't just yell ideas that I believe are bad and expect me to be like, all right, well, after the fifth one, I guess I have to give you one. So I love it. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, honestly, I mean, yeah, I've been dismissive like that in the past. Sometimes I've overgeneralized. I did in this very podcast when I said the whole thing about, you know, Disney fans, you know, want the park to be as it was when Mommy and Daddy were still together. There's generalizations you make, but those generalizations are actually based off encounters you've had with fans. No one's saying you can't be a fan. No one's saying you can't like this and dislike that. But, you know, I guess if you're going to engage people in debate, come up with reasons, which you have, but it's like a lot of people just don't. A lot of people are just like, you know, oh, well, shouldn't be in there because it's an IP. Well, why are IPs inherently bad? Because they're not original. Well, why? Well, you know, that's not the same thing as good and bad. You know, it's like you actually debate the finer points with some of these people, not you, but some of these people. And it's just, well, what other conclusion can we draw other than you just don't like change?
Well, I don't like change, but that's a different point.
Obviously, every person is different. Obviously, every person is going to come across this, you know, with completely different experiences and fall somewhere different on the whole, you know, spectrum of opinion. But the generalizations that are made about stuff like that are made for a reason, and I'm sorry if you feel unfairly targeted by that kind of stuff.
No, I have a platform. I don't care.
Right.
Say whatever you want to me. I'm talking about the people that follow this platform. In that they you know, when people they hear stuff like that, you know, it doesn't like hurt their feelings, but you know, it hurts the morale of the niche a little bit. We like what this is, and we like this, and to be told by, I mean, you also have an entirely different sector that we're not talking about, is the more, you know, mainstream of the people that just say, oh, anything Disney does is great. We love all the come to the new Bugs Land. It's great. That kind of, those magazine articles and those internet critics in that genre that try to do everything. They try to do movies, TV. We all love the parks too. That kind of stuff. That's a whole nother thing. But there's a big niche of people that have a good reason, and I like to stand up for them, is that no, we don't want IPs unless you really intricately theme it. And then it's going to feel fine, and it's going to last. And it's going to last for a long time, not for a short time. And I think that is not based off of feelings or opinions. It's based off of what we think is going to be best for the parks in the long run. And we think the instant you say, you know, what we think is going to be based on, or what you think is going to be best, then once you use the word think, it's ostensibly still an opinion and a feeling about something. Well, it's an opinion and a feeling, but it's not just that. It's you know, we can base it off of other rides and how they've done in the past and how audiences have reacted to them. And what I'm saying is that Disney has a business model, and they're smarter than us because they have all the info on this, including polls and everything they can possibly get. Mm-hmm. But they're working on the side, as I said earlier, of instant gratification rather than long-run prosperity. And my niche wants the latter, and that's what I advocate for.
Well, unfortunately, instant gratification is just kind of the name of the game these days in the internet era, because everyone's, you know, you want some food, here's Grubhub. You want to watch a video, you don't have to, you know, go channel hopping anymore. You can just watch your favorite movie on Netflix. The culture in general today is all about instant gratification, and that's just, Disney's just trying to catch up with that, I think.
Yeah.